Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, is the Omicron variant changing the way governments respond to the COVID crisis? How will the rise in crime rates affect the race for Montgomery County State's Attorney? And predictions for 2022. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former County Council member Nancy Floreen and Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Marc Uncapher. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. The Omicron variant of COVID-19, of the coronavirus, came blundering into Maryland and Montgomery County like a bull in a china shop this past December, upsetting the local healthcare system. In response, Governor Hogan instituted a 30-day state of emergency, which expanded the state's government's power to address the rise in patient volumes at Maryland hospitals. At the same time, the Montgomery County Council, acting as the Board of Health, voted to extend the Montgomery County indoor mask mandate through January, among other significant changes. Marc, while governments have mobilized to fight the variant, they haven't resorted yet to a lockdown of businesses. Why is that?
Well, I'm not quite sure, although I guess I would have to observe that there's been a very deep class divide issue in the whole lockdown debate. Those people that are the most able to work remotely tended to be the most upper income. And a lot of people were put at an extraordinary disadvantage because their jobs didn't allow them to lock down. And I think that fact is sort of beginning to come through, and there's a bit of a recognition that is turning into a reluctance to go back to full lockdown.
Well, I mean, isn't it also the fact that we don't have the seriousness of illness that we had before?
And I think that is a fact. I mean, absolutely. I think that there's a factor too, which is that the good news is that people who get this particular variant, particularly if they've been vaccinated, have fairly mild cases, and so it's nowhere near like it was in the March, April of 2020.
So Nancy, I think Marc's observation about we've learned something in the last 18 months, but here in Montgomery County, my observation is that county government isn't quite sure how to respond yet. I mean, we had metrics that they had announced as to how they were going to address it. I mean, almost 85% of the adults in Montgomery County are vaccinated, and while case levels have risen generally, and this is according to the county's own dashboard, hospitals in Montgomery County and the ICU units aren't overwhelmed. So how is the council responding to this when in this past decision that they made regarding extending the mask mandate?
Well, obviously they're doing their best, but there are real repercussions occurring out there. You saw the news the other day, the school system put out a notice that they didn't have enough bus drivers because of COVID. And this is true of all kinds of workplace environments. One thing to remember is that while Montgomery County residents are, there's a good amount of vaccination rate there, it's not true of many of the people who come into the county from other places and work here. And that's, one of our challenges. Gosh, I don't know that anyone knows what the magic bullet is for all of this. COVID is upsetting to people. And while it is indeed mild for some, apparently it's not the case for others, based on what we're going to talk about in a minute about Governor Hogan's executive order. This is an interesting time for all governments. They can't force human behavior, and we really don't know now what is causing the spread. Is it us people who are vaccinated and boosted who just carry this around with us? Is it just becoming a way of life for us all? We don't know. And I don't think there's any simple solution that anyone has come up with anywhere.
Well, I think the one thing we've learned is that we don't know how to prevent the spread, because even the vaccinated are having breakthrough cases.
Right.
And the idea that if you're vaccinated, you're not going to be able to spread it, I think has been proven false, as
Right.
was
Mhm.
first was thought in the past. So, Marc, I want to go to you. The governor announced the opening of additional testing facilities throughout the state, and that's all well and good. But again, going back to this idea of how do we prevent the spread, what else should the state government be doing?
Well, clearly, I think, as you say, we should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So testing has its role, but some of the other interventions are useful too. But the problem, of course, is the therapeutics. That's not under the control of the state government. And so if they become available and if they become, the FDA does approval and we go through all that process, then it's better. We're in a better position to be able to do that. I would observe, though, that testing has been the Achilles heel from literally 2 years ago, really before we had the lockdown, when the CDC basically stymied the effort of private entities to come up with testing because they wanted to do it themselves. And in many ways, we've been behind the curve ever since in being able to catch up and have a sense of what's spreading and the level of the level of illness that's happened for those who have gotten COVID. And we still really don't have the kind of data that we need to be able to make the best and the most informed decisions.
Well, but Marc, I mean, it's all well and good that the governor opened up these additional testing facilities,
right.
But we do have governors in other states demanding more of the federal government. And Hogan has been relatively quiet on this avenue. I mean, you have Governor DeSantis in Florida demanding that that the federal government be more active on therapeutics. So should Governor Hogan be doing more?
Well, but you put your finger on it, which is that it's more advocacy and less action because it is so dependent on what the federal government does. I'm not sure that in all due respect to Governor DeSantis, it isn't just governors that are going to drive the process forward. It's really a change in mindset, if you will, on the part of CDC, that this is an illness that may be with us for quite a while, and that managing the illness when people have it should become, how shall I say, given more of a priority.
Well, I can tell you that anytime you have any kind of sniffle, and I've got sniffles right now, I've got a head cold, and I tested negative, but everybody looks at you like you've got, 3 heads and the coronavirus, and they don't want you around. But Nancy, I want to return back to this idea about the county government adjusting, and we've talked in the past about the transition from a pandemic to an endemic and how government has to react to this. I mean, there are a lot of people who think mask mandates are just for show. That if you're wearing a cloth mask, it really doesn't do anything to prevent the spread. I mean, so is government being, kind of burying its head in the sand on what it needs to do to address this disease going forward?
The answer to all of this is we just don't know. Is that true that masks don't work? I don't know. If you wear them properly around other people, they may be the most useful tool for protecting ours. But, if we think we're okay and we're vaccinated and we're boosted and we show our card at the theater, we go in and we all sit in there, we're close to other people, maybe it's spreading that way. We're all doing our best, I think, according to the science that's out there. But the science isn't perfect. And, the main problem is that people continue to die, that it affects underlying situations that people have. And those people, I think, are the most likely to not be able to handle the virus. Is there a solution to that one? I don't know. I mean, I've had COVID. I don't know about you folks. Last year, I tested positive. I had it was like a mild flu, same with my husband. And, we came through it fine. Have I gotten it again? I don't know. I've been tested. But, what they also say is that these rapid tests aren't really that reliable. And the ones we do
Don't
at
tell me
home,
that.
that is the word on the street. But that is the best that we have available that's relatively inexpensive and available. And people would argue about that. We just ordered some on Amazon. It's taken 3 weeks for them to be able to get us any. So that's why they're setting up these other testing sites, I guess. But, you know, how are we going to go forward? I don't think we can live like this. And that is the question.
Well, that is the question. When are we going to return to some kind of normalcy?
Yeah,
Casey, I remember ordering masks at the beginning of February in 2020. They never arrived because I guess, you know, it was coming from China. But of course, the first message was masks won't help. And then, of course, we ended up with the mask mandate.
Well, I think we're going to continue to wear masks, you know, depending on how we feel about our own personal safety. But I want to go on to our next topic, which is more, which I find a little more interesting for a political year. And that is one of the more interesting social media sites is one called Nextdoor. And it's a media site designed to share information among various neighborhoods. And any casual user of the site will notice the frequent, almost daily postings about increased criminal activity, break-ins in cars, and so on. And Montgomery County Media, our own MCM, reports that homicides and carjackings doubled in the county during 2021. That's rather shocking increase in crime. Nancy, it may be too soon to interpret the data, but as to the cause of the sharp increase in crime, but this is an election year, and we have a race for the state's attorney. And we have 3 candidates challenging our long-term prosecutor, John McCarthy. So how will the increase in crime dovetail into that election?
Well, if I was challenging John, I would say, oh gosh, the crime rate's up. John has failed. I'm going to fix it. That's going to be their message, I presume. What's interesting about this race is that 2 of the challengers work in Prince George's County. So I'm thinking, you know, they already have jobs. Is this really appropriate for them? But obviously they can get their names on the ballot, and there you go. But I do think that will be the issue. The crime rate is up. What the experts say is the crime rate is up everywhere. For whatever reason, I don't think anyone is willing to admit whatever the source might be, whether it's gangs, whether it's just poverty, whether it's just accessibility. But that's what I've read. That is a national issue right now. And again, you know, you can say we need more police, or we need community policing, or we don't need community policing. You could blame it on people who wanted to defund the police. There are lots of issues out there, but I think the issue for anyone running for state's attorney will be, I can do it better.
Well, that's interesting comment, but you know, McCarthy's got a pretty long track record and a pretty good track record of criminal prosecutions. But I want to go to Marc. Marc, you know, former Montgomery County Bar President Tom DeGonia is probably the best known candidate of the 3, the others being attorney Bernice Maricoux North and Perry Paler. Now, DeGonia was quoted as saying, we need a state's attorney that will hold the police accountable, reduce recidivism, and take community-focused approach to prosecutions. We need prosecutors who humanize each case and are problem solvers, not just processors. Now, this is the part that of his statement that I found the most fascinating. Incarcerations need to go from being a top priority to a last priority. Now, if crime is on the rise, that sounds like a soft on crime message to me. How is that going to be a winning argument in this election?
I should say so. I think he made a mistake by hiring Terry McAuliffe, speechwriter. Because incarceration needs to go from a top priority to last priority, the last resort, I should say. I think if you were going to sort of summarize or in a very succinct phrase what the woke prosecutors that so many large cities unfortunately seem to have, that is the philosophy. And that's about as far away from what Nancy described of you want a prosecutor who's gonna do the job and prosecute and gonna help bring crime down by taking people who are doing bad things off the street. And I think even in Montgomery County, and maybe I'm wrong, but even in Montgomery County, that won't be a politically winning message.
Well, go ahead, Nancy.
Well, remember who they're talking to. The voters who show up may be persuaded by the woke approach. We're a very liberal, left-leaning, progressive voting population. And that, I bet, is a message that's tested among the progressive community. Is that enough? Query that.
Well, I think we have, again, this is I think that all four candidates are running in the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
And I think that's who they're targeting. We have seen that on this county council major changes in how our police are being observed, and other things that affect crime. So there may be, as Nancy's suggesting, that there may be more of a political undertone to take a different approach than what we've seen in the past.
I've been in Montgomery County for a while. I can't remember when crime has risen to be such a sort of top leading issue in the county. I mean, in 20 years ago, we focused on educational stats for our schools. Now we're reading more stories about carjacking. I think that's a very troubling change in the dynamic in the county. It's unfortunate, and it really goes to the quality of life that we have when that becomes kind of a top issue.
Well, I think, go ahead, Nan.
I was saying, and it's a new issue. As Marc says, it's not one that people have been talking about regularly. And so that may be enough to lift up Challenger. I don't know if John is really likely to really face a true challenge, but certainly Tom is a very established presence in Montgomery County. It's interesting that he's chosen to take this on. That really says something.
Well, as you point out, Tom is with a well-respected firm. He was bar president of the Bar Association of Montgomery County, so he's a well-known individual who's come out to challenge John McCarthy. So we'll have to watch this as it unfolds over the next coming months. Stay tuned when we come back from this short break for predictions for 2022. And welcome back. Election years are always the most interesting years to try to handicap. And in this past week, we had Governor Hogan float a trial balloon regarding a possible Senate challenge to Chris Van Hollen. And we also saw former Lieutenant Governor and now political commentator Michael Steele drop out of the race for governor. Marc, since this involves your party, what do you make of these two rather disparate events?
Well, I would love to see Larry Hogan, Governor Hogan, run for the Senate. I think he'd be a formidable candidate. I know that he has struggled a little bit with that decision because he has, as he's indicated, that he's not interested in being a legislator. He loves being governor, and has something a lot of governors seem to have. On the other hand, he's term limited, and so maybe being a senator was more attractive than going back to his real estate business. As for Michael,
do you have any polling on that, Marc?
Sorry?
Do you have any polling on?
I am sure that the Senate the National Senate Campaign Committee is showing Governor Hogan some polling that brings him at least competitive. I don't know that he's ahead, but at least competitive in the race. And as thus far, there really isn't any Republican challenger to Van Hollen.
Well, I think that's pretty fascinating. Obviously the governor has won 2 statewide elections, but to win a Senate race would be quite a feat for a Republican here in Montgomery, in Maryland.
As for Michael Steele, I don't think he ever was seriously considering running for governor. I think if the tell is there, it is the fact that he never bothered to set up a an exploratory committee, so he can never do any polling to find out whether he would do well in a Republican primary, which, given that he endorsed Biden, and could be a question mark, and instead set up a federal committee, a 527. We don't know how much he raised for that, whatever. Big difference is that state campaign funds can't be used for personal purposes. 527s don't quite have the same sets of restrictions as to how they use. So I'll let people draw their own conclusions on that.
Well, I've known Michael a long time. I was surprised that he was even thinking about running for governor. But
if I could just say, I was kind of shocked. I think he would have had a good chance of winning the gubernatorial race. We'll see what happens on the Democratic side,
Sure.
But depending on who makes it, it's going to be an interesting year. And the thing about Hogan, I don't know if he's going to pursue it or not. I mean, it would break a lot of people's hearts in Montgomery County if we really had to go through a big campaign for Chris, because as you know, he's quite beloved here. But you know, Hogan needs a job, and he's well liked.
Well,
I don't, but I have to say, I used to be mayor of a little town of Garrett Park, and for just a couple of years, and I was in the council for 16, and I have to tell you, it's much better being mayor.
Much better being mayor.
It's
really
better to be king, right?
Absolutely, even if it's a tiny little community. But and I think that's the trouble that any governor has going to Congress.
Well, so Nancy, now that we've talked about the state race, the two state race, what's your observations about what's going to happen with the council and the county executive races this coming?
Lord knows. I think Marc has a big advantage as incumbent. It's going to be an uphill battle for him to lose that job. And I don't think anyone knows anything about the county council enough to even care or to get engaged in that. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, can Hucker and Reimer cut into Marc's base? I mean, that's really.
Well, basically, it's three people from Tacoma Park running against each other. Tom doesn't technically live in Tacoma Park, but he's right there. So their base is the same, and maybe Blair can go up the middle. I'd hope so, but we'll see.
Well, Blair's been pretty quiet. I'm surprised that he's been so quiet, at least.
Well, you know, people need to pay attention, and we're getting to that point where people will become interested in it all. And that's when it's worthwhile spending the money and getting engaged.
Well, that takes us to where we have to wrap this segment, and it also cues us up for what's going to happen in the year ahead, because anyone who wants to observe politics in Montgomery County needs to watch this show on a weekly basis. So when we come back from this short break, stay tuned for Parting Shots. And welcome back. Now with Parting Shots, Nancy Floreen.
Well, I'd say to folks, please pay attention. This year, it's going to be important for Montgomery County and the state. So please follow the news. May I recommend the online service of Bethesda Beat? It's the one source of local information about what's happening on a regular basis, and it's a good way to follow your candidates, your issues, if you have any. And the other thing is, please communicate to legislators, to incumbents in particular. If you don't like your tax bill, complain. If you don't like your services, complain. Not enough people complain in Montgomery County, believe it or not.
Thanks, Nancy. And now Marc Uncapher.
Casey, I've got my cloth mask, and unfortunately, I'm reading news articles that say that cloth masks may not be all that effective against the new COVID virus, but I'm doing refresh every day, and the CDC says it's still effective. So it's good until it's not.
Well, thank you, Marc. And I'm gonna just follow up on something Nancy said about complaining to your county councils. One of the things that I think has been lacking for the as a result of COVID is the fact that we've had citizen engagement. I don't think Zoom meetings and Zoom portals into council meetings really are as effective. And I'll look forward to the opportunity when people can appear in person and express their views, because I think they're too easily controlled on a Zoom meeting, as we saw with the Thrive 50 Montgomery plan, with limitations on who could speak and for how long. So for 21 this week, I want to thank the panel for being here. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.